Hello and welcome back to Paleocast. My name is Dave Marshall and you're listening to episode 132, which is the second part of our mini-series on Burmese amber. Here, we pick up where we left things off with Dr Javier Luque, so if you've not yet listened to episode 131, you'll be missing out on a whole load of crabby context, so please do that first. In this part, we'll be examining the remarkable discovery of a crab in amber and getting to know what it looks like, how it lived, how it ended up in amber, and what it tells us about crab evolution. We also touch on the ethical considerations of studying Burmese amber, something that we'll expand upon in the next episode in this series. If you've enjoyed this discussion, then please let me know. I can always do more longer, multi-part, multi-guest thematic interviews in the future. But if you can't wait for something else, I've just recorded another episode on paleo art and that will be released soon. For our Patreon backers, I'll be releasing our annual review show and a lecture just before Christmas. So if anyone else likes the sound of that, please feel free to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/paleocast, links to which are available on our website. And thanks to everyone that's ever contributed to the show. We invest all the money back into its production, including this gorgeous new microphone that I've been saving up for quite a while, so hopefully you can hear the difference that your contributions make. And as always, pictures, videos, and in this instance 3D models that accompany this episode are available on our website, and likes, shares, comments, and ratings all really help the show out and would be a lovely Christmas present. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a Merry Christmas if that's for you. Stay safe with this new variant, and I'll speak to you in the new year when we've passed our 1 millionth download. So, if you were to find a crab that had a very strong association to the land, that would be quite impressive, wouldn't it?
Most definitely, and especially if such a fossil would happen to be a very complete one.
Kind of like your recent paper, perhaps.
Exactly, and that is one of those lucky strikes where all the factors allowing for preservation of a fossil help making a one-of-a-kind discovery that otherwise would be impossible to see in the fossil record.
So tell us about it.
So recently we have done some work on the first fossil crab trap in Mesozoic amber. And this is remarkable because when we think about amber, we think mostly of like forest organisms, insects, spiders, mites, even vertebrates like snakes, frogs, and even birds. So most fossils in amber are terrestrial. How do we explain the presence of some aquatic organisms in amber? And that is challenging for multiple reasons. How fast an aquatic organism can be trapped in amber, and also where was that water body at the time? Was it a little lake? Was it a water pond? Was it a big river? Was it an estuary, or was it a beach on the shore? And in our study, we found that Cretaceous athanata, which is the name of this fossil crab that we just recently published, it was the oldest evidence in the fossil record of a non-marine crab. But not only that, it is preserved in such a pristine, complete detail that it allows us to draw information about the taxonomy, the ecology, the lifestyle, and even the ontogeny of life stage of this organism that otherwise would have been impossible to address from regular fossils.
Right, so this is a remarkable discovery, of course, and I'm sure that many people have already seen it in the news and on social media and whatnot. But I would like to take a lot of what you've just said and what people would already have read, that kind of summary, and now kind of tease it all apart. So if we break it down right to the basics and just start off with what amber is?
Amber is the result of fossil trap of tree sap or resins that have consolidated and fossilized through time.
Okay, so definitely 100% terrestrial, I think we can say.
Yes. Exactly. Amber is produced by trees, and trees live on land.
Okay, and you said it was from the Mesozoic, yes?
Correct. Specifically from the Cretaceous. The Cretaceous period.
And that's from Myanmar.
Correct.
Okay, and what kind of environment did this Cretaceous amber from Myanmar represent? Is it well known? Is it well studied?
There is a lot of information that tells us a very particular story. Even though most fossils are of terrestrial organisms, it also tells us that these forests at the time were close to water bodies, being freshwater, brackish, to shore coastal environments. And the thing is that because it's not just one small spot in time and space, but it extends for many kilometers, we are talking about different portions of that continental setting and that freshwater riverine setting that would allow for preservation of fossils of a coastal origin, of a brackish estuarine origin, full freshwater, and fully terrestrial.
And you've mentioned some of the different animals that are normally found within this kind of amber, but it wouldn't be the only marine organism to have been trapped in amber of this age and from this general region, is it?
No, you are absolutely right. There are other aquatic, either marine or non-marine aquatic organisms trapped in amber. One of the most famous was a recent discovery of an ammonite in amber, and that is an absolutely marine organism. But the reason you could potentially find an ammonite in amber can be explained by the taphonomy and the history of the fossil itself. That ammonite is fragmentary, is broken, and the chambers are filled with sediment. So it has been transported. And if we go to the beach today and walk through the sand or the beaches in a forest, in a tropical forest, in a tropical paradise, you may see a lot of shellfish, snails, and clams that are washed ashore. And doesn't mean that they lived in the mainland or in the shore side of things, but they were just swapped, and you can come across them as beach combs. In this case, it is very possible that this ammonite was trapped in an intertidal setting in a beach and just happened to have trees that were dripping sap close to it and be entombed in such a way that you can find it, a marine aquatic organism. But there are other freshwater animals trapped in amber as well from Myanmar. We have freshwater shrimp, we have freshwater penny beetle larvae, which are restricted to freshwater, and that also gives us some hints that allow us to reconstruct the paleoecology. Because as you can see, we're talking about different spots and different parts of a jungle tropical forestry area close to the shore, but with freshwater influence.
Yeah, I think it's a really important distinction that taphonomy versus ecology. So that's the taphonomy is everything that happens to an organism after it dies, and ecology is like how an organism lives. So in the instance of the ammonite, that was taphonomy. It died, and after it was dead, it somehow ended up in the amber. Whereas when you've got the marine or the freshwater taxa that end up in the amber, that's also capturing some of the ecology. So showing us how it lived as well as what it looked like. So it's an absolutely amazing specimen. How and when was it discovered? And then how did you end up being the one to work on it?
The amber crab from Myanmar it was discovered in 2015. It was collected by local miners and sold in a local market in northern Myanmar in an amber fair where people from all over the place go to buy raw fossils. When I say raw, it means unpolished, unprepared pieces of amber. And you can buy them by the bulk. So many of these jewelry sellers or mineral shop people, they buy this bulk material, they take them to their shops, they polish it, they clean it, and that's when they can reveal the presence of some fossils. Not all amber has fossils in it, and the majority of amber pieces are sold for jewelry, not for scientific purposes. It is only when some people with a keen eye to recognize special inclusions in these fossils can find them and try to rescue them in a way from just ended up in jewelries, especially when they represent unique occurrences for atypical fossils. So this fossil was collected and discovered early during 2015, and then the person in the amber shop that had it, people from the Longian Museum of Amber came across the occurrence of this fossil, and they acquired it, and now it is deposited in this museum for people to study.
Excuse me, get your nose out the microphone. He's come up, smelling of cat food, getting his cat food breath all over me.
Oh my
Please
goodness.
just sit nicely. I know you're happy to see me. I'm going to put you on the floor. I'm sorry. Right. So I want to try and get an idea of how this crab itself ended up in the amber. Are there any clues as to how that happened, either in the form of other fossils or inorganic materials like inclusions in the amber that can give us a clue to how this all happened?
Right. One of the important clues comes from, well, the taxonomy itself and the fossil assemblages, but also the anatomy of the animal itself. We can draw on the spectacular preservation to compare some of the specific features of this fossil, such as the gills. So, because we cannot extract the fossil in amber to study like we do on fossils and rocks, the only way to do a highly detailed reconstruction of these animals is via non-invasive techniques, such as micro-CT scanning. And one of the things we notice, even though this animal is not bigger than 5 millimeters from leg to leg, just like the size of a lentil, the CT scanning revealed the presence of gills. And these gills are preserved in such a spectacular detail that we can compare them with the respiratory systems of other crabs, both aquatic and non-aquatic. And that line of evidence alone is suggesting that this crab wasn't fully marine, neither fully terrestrial, but could have been an amphibious freshwater crab, plus the anatomy and the phylogenetic context in which it fits in the big crab tree of life. But it's also the fossil association. So there are other crabs out there in amber from Myanmar. They just don't happen to be, unfortunately, accessible for research. But they are trapped with tens, dozens of arthropods intermingled with them: spiders, mosquitoes, beetles, silverfish, crickets, cockroaches, which are animals that definitely are terrestrial. And the shrimp amber that I mentioned before are associated with freshwater beetle larvae, which is also hinting about the overall setting where these animals could have been preserved.
So the fossils that you're not allowed to talk about, presumably they are in private collection. Is that frustrating when it comes to writing up your research, how you've got kind of a wonderful answer to this question of how the crab ended up in the amber and what kind of environment it was preserved in. But then you can't use that because it's not published research.
Yes, and that's not just restricted to amber. So I don't work on amber, just happened to work on crabs, and this crab was trapped in amber, hence my study. But there are other fossils trapped in amber that, because of their exquisite preservation and their pristine fossilization style and their completeness, are attractive for private collectors. But that's not exclusive to amber. There are big reptiles and fossil mammals and plants and any other group of fossils you can think of laying in people's houses. And it comes down to a very important conversation that is worth having in a future episode, where we can discuss the current situation about private collections and the replicability of science. So it doesn't matter if the fossil is a dinosaur or a fish or a crustacean. If it is in a private collection and people cannot access it to restudy it, to reinterpret it, and hence to be able to build on top of it, it is a non-existent specimen. It is like an animal in captivity. An animal in captivity is an organism that doesn't exist for its species because they cannot do anything with it, right? Cannot integrate into the big picture. So it is frustrating as a paleontologist to see that many important key specimens are never going to be donated to museums or science, and they are not going to be even available to see the light in a scientific manuscript and for people to know about them. But it's also the how can we manage that in such a way that those collections can be accessible for people, but also making sure that they can be following the standards of ethics and research and science we all want to see as researchers and as humans, as well as people that are the public in general. How do we want to move forward to accessing these exceptional glimpses to a distant past? And I don't know if you saw the news, but a few weeks ago, there was this auction of a spectacular complete Triceratops that is now sitting in someone else's living room. Maybe the specimen itself is not a new species or something that is so dramatic, but it is out of the access for researchers to build on top of it, to build on it. So yes, it could be frustrating at times, and most often than not.
I don't think I'd put that Triceratops in my living room. I think it'd be more of a bathroom kind of fossil. Just think you could put the toilet rolls on it.
Right, exactly. Hang out the towels as well.
When one's gone, you've got two other toilet roll holders to choose from.
Even three.
If the Triceratops owner's listening, please let us know which room you keep it in.
And what you are doing with it.
And what you're doing with it, of course. We don't need pictures if it is what I think it is. Right. Why couldn't this crab escape? So, obviously, it's come out from the water. It's on land, presumably. It's out and about. Then some incredibly slow-moving amber, potentially tree sap or resin, starts to envelop it. Was it dead already?
The evidence suggests that this animal was alive at the moment of being entombed and trapped in the tree sap, and the pieces of the puzzle that allow us to draw those conclusions come from the anatomy itself and the taphonomy itself. This animal is complete. So it's not that it has been transported by the waves or by anything else. It is complete. The position of the animal is a live position. So when you see an animal that has been entombed and died alive, but obviously you need to die alive, but when the animal is trapped in a setting while alive versus when as a corpse, you will see stress in the organism trying to escape this entombing setting, either sediment or amber. And that's the case of the crab. The crab has the legs open. It actually has one leg that has detached briefly, as if was just autotomized or removed, trying to escape this sap that was engulfing it. The mouth parts are opening as this poor thing was trying to breathe. Everything else is in place, and the gills are telling us that this guy wasn't a mold, or this fossil wasn't a mold. It was an actual organism that got entombed. And moreover, if you think of an exuvia or mold, which can also be potentially preserved in the fossil record, in the case of crabs, the molds tend to have very clear elements that tell you that it's a disarticulated molded organism, including the hinge at the back where the animal molds, and the pieces of the, let's call it cheeks, under the carapace surrounding the mouth, that they have little lines as weak planes where the animal break their shell and can come out of it. None of that evidence is present in Cretapsara athanata, and it all suggests and points towards an living encasement in amber with a struggle to try to leave the amber. But it's also the size, right? This animal is super tiny; it's 5 millimeters. So it's not that it could escape as, let's say, a bird could do, or a mammal could do, or a bigger insect could do. This tiny little thing got stuck to the amber, to the sap, so fast that there was no way around it. Once it touched it, it was it for it.
Yeah, we're seeing its final moments some 60, 70 million years later.
Yeah, 100 million years later.
100 million years later. The Cretaceous is longer than the end of it.
Yeah, this is roughly around the mid-Cretaceous, the 99 to 100 million years old in age.
You'd think that I wasn't a biostratigrapher that worked a lot in the Cretaceous, but there you go. Do we see any blood in the leg that has been detached?
Blood?
Blood. Because I've seen it in spiders that have got trapped in amber, where there's been, a leg that's been pulled off, and then as the amber's been flowing, there's been tiny little blood droplets left in a row.
In this particular specimen, there is no such an evidence. Also, the specimen is really small, so seeing it with the naked eye might be more challenging than seeing it on a bigger arthropod such as spider. It seems like it was autotomized, and crabs have the ability to detach some of their limbs quickly and clog it, so there's no blood drainage, and it happens at the base of the leg in the coxa. So this is what seems to have been the case for Cretapsara.
We've mentioned before that it's absolutely tiny. You said the size of a lentil, which I think is brilliant. Was it fully grown? Do we know anything about its ontogeny, like how it grows?
We can also draw some inferences based on its anatomy. So when I mentioned before that the larvae of crabs have these distinctive morphologies, the zoea with these long spines and huge roundish tiny like eyes in tiny sockets, and the long shrimpy tail, and this megalopa-like crab that is just in a transitional state in between. Well, no, this Cretapsara, the holotype or the type specimen, looks like a tiny juvenile of something that was potentially bigger. It's hard to know with a sample size of 1, but based on those specimens that we didn't want to study because they were not accessible, but we already have seen images of them, they are homogeneous in shape and size. So they are either a batch of baby crabs trapped in amber, or this is a really tiny dwarf species. It would be a bold statement without having plenty of specimens to draw some conclusions about growth and size, but this particular one, based on the holotype of Cretapsara, we can say it is a post-larval stage, most likely a juvenile.
I think it's interesting given the conversation that we had before about the different stages of growth and the metamorphosis and their ecology, how they're living at that time, and as to whether or not there could be some sort of bias to preserving crabs of that size or of that stage in their growth in amber. Say, like, if they just at this stage of growth all love to go and sit up trees or something like that. It'd be fascinating.
It would be fascinating indeed. So that's one of the advantages of amber, that it allows to trap organisms of different sizes and ontogenetic stages in ways that more dynamic settings under a water influx and currents and tides will most likely be destroyed really fast.
Okay, so let's have a look at the actual morphology, its anatomy. You've said it's exquisitely well preserved. You've talked about a little bit about its limbs, a little bit about its gills. What else is there? Is it completely complete? Can you see everything?
Virtually, we can see everything that is outside. It is preserved in such a detail, despite of a small size, that you see all of their walking legs, their claws, the big eyes, the big compound eyes, tiny antenna, the mouth parts, and those mouth parts are covered, lined with tiny setae or hairs. So basically, this animal is not missing a single hair in their body. When it comes to the internal structures, however, we don't get to see other soft tissues like stomachs or guts or hearts, but because they decay really fast. And yet we get to see the gills, which is remarkable by itself.
And is there anything in its morphology that can tell us about its ecology? Is there any clues in its shape that tells us how it lived?
This animal was its anatomy is reminiscent of what we could call modern-looking crabs, highly derived modern-looking crabs, and I think of shore crabs like salilite foot crabs or some of these groups called sesarmids, tree climbing crabs. And the anatomy is so similar that it's just impossible not to wonder, was this crab a terrestrial one that was climbing trees and living in water ponds on epiphyte plants, such as modern sesarmids do? And in fact, there are Miocene fossil crabs in amber from Mexico that belong to this group of arboreal tree-dwelling crabs. So was this the case of Cretaceous, or is this a tiny juvenile of an amphibious freshwater species that got trapped by the edge of a riverbank? So the morphology itself is telling us something about its relatedness with other crabs in the big tree of life. So we can see that it is already an advanced body form that we wouldn't expect to find in this moment of time. Back in the mid-Cretaceous, most other crabs were more basal looking. They were quite different from what you would see as a typical crab, but this one is so modern looking and fits within the modern crabs in the tree of life that is giving you a hint already that what we call highly derived crabs, that clade or group has already an early beginning back into the mid-Cretaceous. And moreover, the completeness of this crab allows us to recognize it as the most complete fossil crab ever discovered, which is important if we draw on the fact that the molecular divergence estimates of the split between non-marine crabs and their marine relatives has been estimated at 130 million years, roughly, give or take, which is the early Cretaceous, the moment of the split between non-marine groups and their marine counterparts. But the fossil record of terrestrial and freshwater crabs, non-marine crabs, is much younger, restricted to mostly the Cenozoic and the early Paleogene up to the latest Cretaceous, 70 to 50 million years ago. And this huge gap obscures our understanding on the evolution of the different groups that have conquered these new environments outside of the ocean through time. And Cretaceous bridges that gap in an exquisite detail because of its preservation, that is more than just claws and pincers and little carapace fragments compared to the regular rock fossil record, but also the age that pushes back the timing of origin of the clades that incur into these novel environments.
It must have been a dream come true to find that crab with that kind of impact to our understanding of their evolution for you to work on, to come across.
It is definitely one in a lifetime occurrence. And even though there might be other crabs out there, this is the first of its kind, and it opens new avenues to understanding the evolution of aquatic organisms by allowing the fossil record in amber to give us new hints about the pathways towards evolution of these groups that otherwise would be really hard to come across in regular fossil rocks.
So what is it about crabs that permits them to terrestrialize apparently so easily?
The transition from marine to non-marine habitats or settings is an infrequent event in most metazoan groups, most big animal groups. And this is for many reasons. One, physiological constraints, osmoregulation, respiration, vision, etc. Also, moving into non-marine settings from the ocean, it exposes you to a competition with other organisms that you are not accustomed to compete with, and also expose you to new predators that are very good at doing what they do in the habitats, but it might take you some time to fit well within the new habitat, right? Curiously, crabs alone, true crabs alone, have abandon the ocean and explore new habitats in land and freshwater and brackish water over 12 times independently. It's like, wow, okay, so if such an event is infrequent in most other animal groups, what is giving crabs an edge to move from marine to non-marine habitats? So one of the things we can learn about Cretaceous is that this could have happened multiple times, all of them within the highest clade or group of true crabs, where the remainder of crabs are just marine. But the reasons why, the biological, organismical mechanisms behind it, physiological mechanisms, remain a mystery. And this is one of the things we are currently exploring within our NSF-funded grant to study the crab tree of life, is also to map those events of terrestrialization across the crab tree to see if we can draw conclusions about what genetic underlying material, what pathways can allow them to move to land in such an efficient way, but also drawing clues from their fossil record.
So we can't talk about amber from Myanmar without addressing what is going to be the elephant in the room, and that's the ethics of studying this material. We're going to have a follow-on episode about this subject very soon, but can you briefly tell us about the situation there and how then you were able to work on this specimen?
Myanmar is a country with a rich history that has seen the influence of multiple sides through time, people conquering back and forth from Myanmar and outside and vice versa. The region that they called Burma. So Myanmar is a more restricted name in a way. Burma would be a more inclusive term to refer to the nations within that territory. The thing about Myanmar is that this has also seen the wax and wanes of different socio-political approaches to societies and what it implies for freedom and human rights. And although Myanmar, during the beginning of the second decade of the 20th century, was moving towards a pathway of more democratic politics behind it, it and by 2015, 2016, it was looking very promising. In 2017, mid 2017, there was a recrudescence of some hostilities that have shifted the dialogue about what is the social, cultural, and humanitarian cost behind some of the scientific practices in Myanmar. One of them is the extraction of amber. The thing is that this is a very interesting topic, really complex, that has multiple phases to it. And the amber itself, it has been marketed for thousands of years in the region. And it's only until recently that some specific pieces have been purchased in the regular markets. But it comes down to who is exploiting that amber and where is the money going to. So before, until 2016, most of this amber was exploited, mined by local miners. They have their own pieces of land where they extract it and they sell it to vendors that purchase it. And now, during the last 5 years, since 2017, 4 years, it has been seized by the militaries, and now they have control over the region. So it also brings the conversation about what is the humanitarian cost behind it, and where is this amber now going, and what is the money of it supporting, indirectly or directly. So the invitation to this all is to recognize that even though we can learn a lot about prehistory through a fossil, there is also a valuable lesson about history that we cannot look away of anymore. It is an important part of our research as scientists, and but first of all as humans, to understand that there are repercussions in a rapidly changing world, and we can have the power to help shifting the conversations and raising the voices of those who have been traditionally non-heard, to use these type of fossils as ambassadors for a message to bring awareness that is not just beautiful science done behind the specimens. There is a human cost, especially in the recent time. And there, as you mentioned before, is an elephant in the room. It has been a moratorium proposed by the vertebrate paleontology to stop research on specimens acquired after 2017, and more especially after February 2021, because precisely of this recrudescence of the humanitarian conflict in the region, which I completely support. And I think it is in part of our power to do something beyond science with this type of material whenever is ethically possible, and also ensuring that we can do our share on spreading the voice and making us all aware about the world we live in.
Yeah, so with the ethics and then the private collectors that we've been talking about, private collections, like there's a lot to consider with stuff going on in with Burmese amber. So yeah, but looking back at crabs, is there a lot left to discover about their evolution, or has this new specimen answered all of the questions that you had?
By any means, the evolution of crabs is as fascinating as you can think of, and more vibrating right now than ever. And the more answers we find, or the more evidence we come across, the more questions arise. This is a lifelong program to understand some of the needs and gritties of the evolution of such a fascinating group, and how evolution can sort for a particular body forms suited for a particular ways of living. And this is just the beginning. A part of our grant that I mentioned before to address the evolution of crabs through time is hopefully just the beginning of a way bigger picture that will allow us to integrate it with other parts of the story, such as the evolution of decapods as a whole, and ecology, taxonomy, and phylogeny through time and space. So yes, lots of work to do.
And how much of that information is likely to come from amber?
Lots of it, especially because of the amount of specimens and taxa represented in amber and the exceptional preservation of it. But those will only give us hints until so much far in time until there is, as long as there are trees preserving fossils and mostly terrestrial. So we want to take a look at the evolution of marine organisms. We have to direct our eyes towards other types of deposits and also other parts of the world. So there is a lot to discover, and amber itself will contribute with some special, crucial pieces of the puzzle, but by no means with all of them.
And how would you sell the study of crabs to any potential students listening?
Well, crabs are a wonderful group to study because the amount of questions that remain to be answered, but also the way we can study them, being hard body organisms that we can touch, and they're not just melting in our hands, that they live from the depths of the oceans to rivers and caves and the coral reefs, and they are great pets, even though they are not as cuddly as a cat. They are fun to have in an aquarium. They are important in our environment, and they are crucial for the roles and the ecosystem, the recycling of nutrients, and part of the food chain as predators and prey. They have the potential to answer several questions about evolution in deep time. It's not just the only group. There are so many other groups of crustaceans and arthropods and invertebrates and animals as a whole. But crabs have a special pantheon, a special place in the pantheon of organisms to study, especially because the diversity in form and function and the answers we can get from studying the convergence of such forms in time and space.
Javier, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward for more conversations about fossils and other things.
Paleocast was brought to you by Dave Marshall and Liz Martin Silverstone, with contributions from Tom Fletcher, Vish Venkat, and Elsa Pancharoli. Music was composed by Patrick Kendall Smith. Paleocast was made possible by funding from the Paleontological Society and the Paleontological Association, but the show now relies on funding from you, the listeners. So, if you've liked this episode, please consider donating, and thanks to everyone that's helped out so far. Please visit paleocast.com for the supplementary material to this episode and for our archive of past programs, and follow us across social media platforms to get all the latest news. Finally, if you enjoy our podcast, then please explore all of our video content on YouTube and follow our other projects, the Virtual Natural History Museum and the Paleocast Gaming Network.